This is a video of graphing sinusoidal functions. The first slide here is a warm-up slide. What do you notice about the two graphs, sine and cosine curve? They have the same amplitude. They have the same center line, and they have the same period. So the amplitude for both is 1. The center line for both is y equals 0, and the period for both is 360 degrees. And what do you notice that's different? The y-intercepts are different, and the x-intercepts are different. The sine curve starts on the center line and ends one period later on the center line. The cosine curve starts at a maximum and ends after one period at a maximum. The cosine curve is actually the sine curve shifted 90 degrees to the left. So if I shifted this curve 90 degrees to the left, then it would look like the red one. So if I shifted the blue one 90 degrees to the left. The equation for the sine function, we went over this before. I said this was B and this was D. Well, now I can look at it this way, that I can do the same thing for cosine. Amplitude times cosine 360 over the period times x plus the midline. In past activities, I called it center line, so same thing. On slide 3, you're supposed to match the graphs up. So sine starts on the center line, ends on the center line in one period. The negative sign is you start here. It starts on the center line again, but it goes down first and then up. So is this graph reflected over the x-axis? So every maximum becomes a minimum, every minimum becomes a maximum. Cosine curve starts at a maximum, and then one period later it ends at a maximum. The negative of that is just, once again, reflecting over the x-axis. Every maximum becomes a minimum, every minimum becomes a maximum. So the sine curve is the red one. The negative sign is the green graph. Cosine is the blue graph. And negative cosine is the orange graph. Example 1 here, you want to find the midline. So you can add the maximum 2 and the minimum -6 and divide by 2. So you're finding the average of the maximum and minimum to find the center. It's y equal -2. The amplitude, you can do the maximum minus the minimum divided by 2, which is 4, or you go from the center line to the maximum was 4 units, or from the center line -2 to -6 would be 4 units. The period, 1 cycle of this cosine curve from this maximum at 0 to this maximum of 8, so the period is 8. And just plugging in then y equal the amplitude 4 times cosine 360 over the period, which is 8, x plus the midline, or in this case is negative, plus a -2, which is same as -2. And then if I want to simplify 360 over 8, it becomes 45. So y equal 4 cosine 45x minus 2. Example 2, they're saying this is a cosine curve again, but we're starting at a minimum and ending at a minimum, so it would be a negative cosine curve. So I don't know what happened to this grid here, but the maximum is 8, the minimum 2. This center of that would be 8 plus 2, which is 10 divided by 2, 5. So y equal 5 is the center. The amplitude, 8 minus 2 would be 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then the period, if we wanted to go from min to min, so 0 to 6, is 6 units. And then plugging in, like I said, I know this is negative cosine because it starts at a minimum and then ends on a minimum 1 cycle later or 1 period later. So negative 3 cosine 360 over 6 times x plus the center line or midline is 5. So if I want to simplify what's in the parentheses, negative 3 cosine 6 times x plus 5. So the notes on graphing: sketch the midline, find the period divided by 4. That's to find the scale on the x-axis. Find the maximum and min based on the amplitude from the midline. So I always do this first and then this second. And this is just for the scale on the x. And then decide whether it's sine or cosine. And should I put a negative or out front or not, depending on what the shape of the curve is. And then plot the points and sketch it. So the first one, they give you the equation 3 cosine 6x plus 2. Here's the midline, y equal 2. The amplitude right here is the 3. The period is 360 over 6, which is 60. So in this case, I use the scale of 15. This would be 15, 30, 45, 60 is right here. So for the cosine curve, you start on the maximum, 0.5, go to the maximum, 65, and then halfway between 0 and 60 is 30. I'm at a minimum, 0, negative 1, and then halfway between 0 and 30 is 15, and I'm at the center line too. Halfway between 30 and 60 is 45. I'm on the midline or center line again, 45 too. And then I can just repeat this pattern. So 1, 2 on the center line, 1, 2 center line, 1, 2 center line, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 maximum, 1, 2, 3, 4 maximum down here, 1, 2, 3, 4 minimum. So notice that I started here at y equal 2, then used my amplitude of 3, so I went up 3 and down 3, and then I labeled those horizontal lines, and then I found my points by going to maximum, halfway between minimum, halfway between 0 and 30 on the midline, halfway between 30 and 60 on the midline. So this right here, this first, that's just one period of the cosine curve there. So I would expect you to at least do 1 cycle or 1 period. Example 2, picking off this negative 1, that's my midline, y equal negative 1. The amplitude is always positive, even though this has a negative. It's just telling you which direction we go first. So the amplitude is 5, or from the center line to the maximum. And the period is 360 over 90, which is 4. So I made this scale 1/2 here. So 1, and then skip a tick mark 2. So every other tick mark would label as a whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my x values here. And then on the y, I went by 1. So the x is going by 1/2, the y is going by 1. And then since this is a negative sign, start on the center line at 0, end on the center line 4, halfway between is 2, negative 1 on the center line. And since it's negative sign, we're going to go down to a minimum first, 1, negative 6, then up to the maximum 3, 4. And this point actually right here is 5, negative 6. So here's one cycle of the sine curve, and then I just extended it a little bit to fill the whole grid space. So on this side, I could go 1, 2, the max up here. So looks like that. All right, so here they give the amplitude, the midline, the period, and by this description here, at 0, the graph's at the middle point, and after 0, the graph goes up first. So that's describing the sine curve. So we got y equal to sine 360 divided by 4 x, and midline 0. So if I were to simplify what's in the parentheses, y equal to sine 90 x, and my midline is 0. So once again, you want to start with your midline. Y equals 0. That's the x-axis. We'll do the straight edge tool. Make it a little bit neater. So y equals 0, and then up to. So y equal 2, and then down to. Y equal -2. Let me go ahead and label those. Center midline at 0. All right, here's my 3 horizontal lines labeled there. And then since my period is 4, once again, I'm going to go by half here to stretch this out a little bit. So let me label the x-axis in blue 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. Get these numbers in the right places here. All right, so if I wanted to plot this, it's a sine curve, positive sine at 0 on the center line, 4 on the center line, 2 on the center line, at 1. That would be at a maximum, 3 a minimum. And this would go down here. So there's one cycle of the sine curve from 0, 0 to, 4, 0. So let's go ahead and label these. So 1, 2, 2, 0. This is 3, -2. And then back to 4, 0. this is 0, 0. Then the midline is y equal 2, right here. Amplitude is 4. The period is 1. And if I wanted to draw this, then y equal 2. Is my center line, and then my amplitude is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I were to label these y equal 2, up 4, this would be y equal 6, down 4, y equal -2. All right. So since my period is only 1, I can go by a fourth here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be 2. All right. So I'm a negative cosine. So here I'm going to start at a minimum. And at 1. I end at a minimum. Then at 1/2, be at a maximum. 1/4 on the center line. 3/4 on the center line. And you just count 1, 2, dot, 1, 2, dot. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And maximum. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then draw a curve through there, a sine curve. And I'll label some of these points here. So this one would be 0, -2. This one. 0.5, 6. There's a 0.25 and 2. Yeah, excuse me, 0.75 and 2. And then this point would be 1, -2. So that's one cycle right there labeled. It's on one label, but should give you the idea what's going on there. Number 11, or slide 11, y equal 1 is the midline. The amplitude is 6. The period 360 divided by 45 is 8. So start with the midline, like 1. Oops. Get it straight as gold. And up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Should be y equals 7 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So y equals 7. This is y equal 1. And then my min line would be -5. Ugh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my period is 8. So I'm going to go by 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Got it labeled right. Negative cosine curve. So I'm going to start on the center line. And then at my period, I'm going to center line halfway between center line and then add 2 being a minimum. And at 6 a maximum. So try to draw a curve through here. and label some of these points. Zero, 1. 2, -5. And then this point is 6, 7. Point would be 8, 0. Oops, this is 8, 1. And this is 4, 1. And then the last slide, at 0, the graph's at a maximum, so that would be cosine. So 2 cosine. $360 divided by 36 is 10x. 10, and then put an x beside it, I should say. And then my midline is -3. So starting at the midline, y equal -3. And then amplitude 2. Go ahead and label these. And my period is 36, so let me see. So let's make this a 9. Wait a second. I was thinking of making that 3, but that doesn't work because let me get it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Times 3 is 27. I only go to 30. And I want 36. So let's make this a 4. What's going on here? There we go. 4, 8, 12. 16, 20, 1, 2, 3. Eight, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 30. All right, so all right, so it's a cosine's curve, positive. We're going to start at a maximum, 36. You're going to end at a maximum. Halfway between would be 18. So this is 20, 18 right here. Halfway between 0 and 18 is 9. And then halfway between 18 and 36 would be 27. Oh. And label some of these. Zero, -1. And 36, -1. 18, -5. And halfway between 0 and 18 would be 9. 9, -3. And 27. All right, that's all 12 slides.